Greetings, all you people in entertainment land. Welcome to another episode of the live Vlogcast. Of course, who knows who might be joining us in the audience tonight, but I do at least know who's joining us on the show. For we have two people who have been with us for a good while now on these, Dane Kyle and David Striggy.
Hello.
Again, wonderful people. Glad to have you both with us for this conversation today.
Yeah.
And of course, my normal co-host, Kotobuki Jake,
Hi.
always there for something. And our theme today apparently is digging to hell, which mainly I just thought about it because I wanted to lead off with this because we never got a chance to talk about it last time. Which was the movie Antrim, which Dane actually recommended to me. And then I recommended it to my wife, and I somehow ended up watching it twice in a row. So...
And you're still alive.
Yeah, I'm still alive. It hasn't killed me yet. And supposedly this is one of those, it's a cursed film, and it comes with a kind of like pre-documentary that's kind of in front of it and ends it and plays the film in the middle. And the film is about this girl who loses her dog, and her sister decides, well, I will help her psychologically by having her dig a hole in the ground to get the dog's spirit from hell.
Oh,
That was a little boy.
Was it? Oh, little boy. Sorry. Been a couple of weeks now.
some people get those confused.
Yeah.
He did have kind of longish hair, and he looked very
Big-
similar to Charlie Bucket from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
So he did have big floppy ears.
But I liked the film. I didn't think it was perfect by any means, but I did really like the concept, and I thought that it was executed in a good way. It was creepy. Where they had the movements and the noise out in the background, I thought that they did an excellent job of that, making the film itself look like it was from the 70s. Also, really good job with that. So it just was really good. And I know, like I said, I know you saw it before I did, Dane, and you're still with us at least partially. And,
Well, it didn't kill me. It didn't kill me on the outside, only on the inside. But so I saw it because my friend from England, Tony Newton, he recommended it to me, and he was like over the moon with how much he loved the film and how much he thought it was a benchmark for independent horror. And so, my curiosity piqued pretty well, and plus it's called Antrim, the deadliest film ever made, and it's like, well, that's a bold statement right there. So clearly this is a film that wants you to remember it, so that's a good thing right off the bat. So I was watching it, and I really loved the intro and the outro with the documentary sections. So it was in a different kind of found footage film because it was not found documentary footage, but it was a lost film that they happened to play, which is pretty cool. And I liked the I could have even stood to have more of the beginning and the end because I thought it was really fascinating. But then the film itself, I think that the creepiest parts about it were obviously all the subliminal things that they put in there. I think that more horror films could stand to do subliminal messages in their in the editing. I actually have done that a few times, and I find I did it just as a joke, but I think it could really heighten the experience quite a lot if you were to go back and see certain things that you didn't catch before. And I think for me, the creepiest part was the part with the picture of I guess it was Astaroth, but the picture that you can like kind of sort of make out, but it's not all that clear. But then it becomes slightly more clear. it's just that right amount of ambiguous and clear, and that was very creepy. I my big thing with the film is like I feel like the actual film itself, while it did do a good job of looking more or less like it was shot in the 70s, I think that the actual film itself could have been creepier. And I think that this main plot, or the thing that gets it going was, and I kind of saw this coming, but I was like, spoilers. I kind of saw this coming. The fact that the whole ritual thing was just the older sister's attempt to make their little brother feel better about losing the dog. Because, when I was watching, I was like, this person cannot be doing this for sincere reasons, because it is a dog at the end of the day. It's not like it was their grandma or their mother or something like that. And so, with her having said that she made it all up, I knew that that was coming. But what apparently, I guess, the big theme of the film was about, how, our perceptions of reality and our, desires to kind of make our own reality, how those can come true in all kinds of terrifying ways, like in the story, as well as with what the actual Antrim film was supposed to have done to those who saw it. And so that's an interesting theme. I just, for me personally, I felt like the actual story within the film was not overly scary, but I did like what was done to it with all the subliminals and everything.
I was gonna say it wasn't the story itself as much as everything. It was the mood it created.
Yeah.
It made you really feeling, well, at least for me, it made me feel very tense as it was going on, and as it kept going. The way that they would play the creepy music, having the figures moving around in the background, it just it built that tension very well.
Oh yeah. Well, I actually, okay, I'll say this. Like, when I say the film itself, I mean mostly them digging and doing their rituals, and the guys with the Wicker Man kind of Baphomet, uh, whatever you'd say, outdoor oven. The that whole thing. Like, I feel like that could have been creepier. Well, I think the climax is decently creepy in a kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre way. The parts that I thought were legitimately creepy, if not outright scary, were the dream sequences. Like, I'm a sucker for a really good dream sequence, especially when they go full blown into really surreal imagery. And this one definitely did, as well as really pushing it as far as how you could show something demonic, and create that mood without it being cliche, or without it being too much or too little. It left a lot to the imagination, but it also made you feel like, okay, if this were a real cursed film that was really meant to be a way of conjuring this demon, then this would be a good way to do it, especially given how many sigils of Astaroth there were throughout the film. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, and the actual image of what I assume was supposed to be Astaroth, the actual image was quite unsettling, because it did look like our typical artist representations of what the devil or what demons are supposed to look like, but it you couldn't quite make it out, and you got the sense that the demon was really looking through the TV at you. And that's something I don't say lightly. And so that alone, I thought, was what made it a worthwhile film to see, because you do not get that effect too often in films about the supernatural.
Actually, there was one other thing before we move on with Antrim. It was, of course, it's free. Well, it's open to anybody on Amazon Prime who wants to watch it. And of course, there's a physical that Amazon will burn for you, which is pretty cool.
Check out my unboxing video for more info on that.
There you go. And one thing, though, I thought was interesting when we talk about these documentaries done along with these types of films, it's I remember there was a film not too well. So actually, I say not too long ago, but it's been like 20 years or so. And that was Rose Red, Stephen King. When they did that, they had that documentary, that fake documentary that they did about them going into the house, which was a great way of like prepping for the film.
Which was, I believe, actually like bits and pieces of the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, the movie, I believe.
Yeah,
I remember correctly.
Well, the documentary, it had like it was basically saying this is going to be what we feel is going to happen in the house. It's going to set it up so that it would make you think like they were really planning on doing this stuff, and that they decided to just make a movie based on what they thought was going to happen, even though it didn't. Mm-hmm. Oh, and just because we will also introduce Mo here, who has come in to join us.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hello.
Did you see Antrim?
I did not. I watched Dan's video though.
Cool. Did you have you've seen Rose Red?
That should have.
Yeah, I've seen Rose Red several times. Loved it.
So you know what I'm talking about? Did you see the little like setup documentary they did, the little fake one about like how the investigators are going to go into the house and do that?
Yeah, stuff like that's rad, man.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say hello to Michael McNally, who came and stopped by. We're back down to 0, so I'm guessing he's left. But hello there, if you are still there. And over to Mo. Since you weren't here with us last time, I figured I'd go ahead and give you a case to start to come after that with a film to throw out there that you saw.
I guess I'll plug that Hollow one. I think it's a Canadian movie. I don't know though. It's pretty fun. It's a 2015 film. It's like about these people find an alien artifact, and it's controlling people with these little remote discs. And it's a good example of one of those movies where it's absolutely amazing until the ending. So that one kicked ass. I loved the Hallow. But I'm a sucker for anything to do with like changeling stories, because I just think that's the creepiest shit ever. So if it's any type of baby swapping creatures and stuff, I'm good with it. Unfortunately, the Hollow one did not have anything like that. It was trying to be kind of like a cosmic horror Lovecraftian type thing, but then they ruin it by like directly making it like a Christian thing at the end. They build up all this sweet like infinite ancient horror shit, and then it's like, oh, I just wanted to learn about your god or something. Like, what? It's a bit out of left field, but it's worth seeing, and I think it's available on Tubi at the moment. So if you guys get a chance, check it out.
Tubi's gotten to be a really good resource for these types of things. Does anybody else has seen this movie? I haven't. So
the Hollow?
No, the Hollow one. The Hollow rocked.
The Hollow one. Okay, that one.
Yeah, it's worth seeing for sure. If you like good sort of, alien horror, I guess. And it's kind of got a bit of a zombie thing going on, but not, they're like basically remote controlled humans, and they drink this black sludge. It's not overly like bloody or gory. So, Jake could easily handle. Oh, there it is right there. Yep, that's the one. Yeah, if you could find it, for like free, it's totally worth the time.
Well, then I guess we'll move, since Dane, you were the last one to go last time. I figured I would give you a chance to go a little bit further up in the queue.
All right.
And I figure I'll go to you, then Jake, then Dave. So
sorry, I don't got more on that. It's the last thing I watched. And
hey, you never know. Sometimes they're conversation starters, like that strange. We had 2 conversation starters last time, so you never know.
Right.
Well, what have I been watching? Well, I watched Cannibal Ferox, which, if you'll recall, was the first unboxing that I did for the channel Independent. It was an indie horror film creative. That's the new channel. That was the first unboxing I did, so I finally got to watch it, and I liked it. It wasn't quite as intense as Cannibal Holocaust. It did have some animal deaths, but most of them were actually animals eating other animals, and so it was like, well, they're just doing what predatory animals do. There was like maybe two or so instances of humans killing animals on screen, but it wasn't quite as sadistic as in Cannibal Holocaust, and it wasn't as prolonged. In the context of the story, one is like self-defense that kind of goes a little overboard, and then the other one is more eating an animal for food, because they're in the jungle and they need food, but it isn't as sadistic as the other one. I think it on the whole it wasn't as strong as Cannibal Holocaust, mostly because, well, it is not presented as a documentary, and it has the usual Italian cinema of that period, the usual problems with the dubbing and kind of how seriously do you take it, that sort of thing. It wasn't nearly as atrocious as Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals in that department, but it was solid. I saw that, and then I need to finish up a movie called Bond Cop Bad Cop, which is a Canadian buddy cop action film, and it won Best Picture at the Genie Awards when it was out. It was like a 2006 film, 2005, 2006, something like that. And need to finish it up, but it so far it's pretty solid. It's an English-speaking Toronto cop having to team up with a French-speaking Montreal cop to solve a murder.
Yeah, that one looked super. Like, I was intrigued by that. I think I need to.
It's pretty strong so far. It's one of those things where they have the Blu-ray that I was watching. They have several different options as far as watching it back. Like, you can watch with English. You can watch it with subtitles for the English parts if you're a French speaker, or vice versa if you're a native English speaker. Or you can watch it without any subtitles at all if you're perfectly bilingual. They really seem to be doing a big service to try to blend the Francophone and the Anglophone cultures of Ontario and Quebec together. And it's a fun time. It has a good kind of dark sense of humor, and it's something that it's a good kind of cultural education as far as some of the differences between the two, the English speaking and French speaking parts of Canada, and their similarities, their differences, and some of the fun kind of making fun of the other kind of banter that they do.
All right. Well, actually, I will be interested in getting your final thoughts once you have finished it.
I'm about like maybe 3/4 of the way through. I just it was kind of late in the game when I was watching it. I had to go to sleep, but it's good. You've got good acting and good both of the main actors, despite them kind of favoring their native tongue, one of them English, the other one French, they can actually speak French and English respectively, and they can speak it well. They just it's their kind of their default language, and they can still understand each other. It's just more so like when they're in Quebec, they try to speak French as much as possible. When they're in Ontario, they try to speak English as much as possible. And you kind of see the what I assume is sort of the playful whatever I'm trying to say, interaction between the two cultures that I'm sure goes on in real life. I don't know how tense it is or isn't, but it I'm sure is definitely there. in the way that they were showing it. But yeah, it's so far it's solid. It's just nice to watch films that are very not American, because it kind of like, I guess you could say, sort of like for another kind of buddy cop film, something like Hot Fuzz, although it's not quite as it's not anywhere near as frenetic and crazy as that. But you know, it's a decent, you know, window into well, not only the British sense of humor, but just, you know, how, you know, the English police force would work, and, you know, some of that kind of thing. So, you know, it's
Right.
always a great way to learn about another culture by taking a little window into their artistic output.
So, Jake,
Especially a fun one. Hmm?
why don't you throw us one our way? I know you got a list.
I've got a list, and we're actually making pretty good time so far. Yeah.
Well, see, then you're going to throw in the big bomb, the one that's going to be the huge conversation starter.
Well, you never know. So, you're talking about, or we're talking about potentially a window into another, you know, culture or another whatever.
Or to
One that
hell.
I've been, or to hell, yes, or that, which it could be considered another culture.
Very subterranean. Summers are not fun.
Yeah, I don't want to presume to know their ways, you know.
Timeshares are very overpriced.
Customs are a pain in the butt, though.
Oh yeah, you don't have a snowball's chance of getting certain things through.
Well, no, it would be one of those ones where when entering, customs will be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And when you're leaving, that's when they give you trouble.
Yeah.
It's either
Be
that
like,
or you're dealing with drunken customs people.
Really,
What?
hell's probably just a room with a moose, like an Invader Zim. I don't know.
There was a time when my family and I we were traveling in between Budapest and the Czech Republic, and we all had given our passports to these drunken ass customs people, and they came back like 2 hours later with it and said we could go.
Oh wow!
Well, if it was a moose there, would it be a Canadian moose as far as the Guardian?
Yeah, I would say so.
I would think so.
One of the only stamps on my passport is from the Czech Republic, and the people there said, "Well, we don't really do this anymore, but some of the tourists really want some of these Soviet-era stamps on their stuff, so we do it anyway."
Right.
Well, I mean, that'd be kind of a neat souvenir, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, the the one that I have been sitting on for some time, to the point where I hope I remember it well enough. But this was actually a really good movie, and again, you're talking about a window into other cultures or whatever. There was a film that was nominated 2 years ago, I think. Was nominated for foreign language feature from Lebanon, and it's called The Insult. And basically, I finally got to see it a little bit after the fact. But basically, you have these two dudes. Del Karam is a Lebanese Christian, and Kamel El-Basha is a Palestinian refugee who is doing basically hard labor. He's a foreman for a construction crew, but basically doing labor work in Lebanon. And an altercation born out of just stupidity. Basically, the native accidentally pours water on this workman's crew, and rather than properly apologizing, he just antagonizes them. So then
because that's a smart thing to do.
Yes, and then the foreman, rather than trying to forget about it, put his head down, go about his business, he goes right up and basically just says, "Hey, look, this is not going to stand." It doesn't quite go in the way I think most Americans would assume. It definitely, they actually go to court, and it's sort of a
Oh shit, escalates.
yeah. It's sort of like you could think of like I guess the People's Court Lebanon edition, that sort of thing. But it's actually a really, really, really good movie. You have the foreman's boss is actually a friend of the other guy, and he's trying really hard to smooth things over on both counts. He actually sets up multiple opportunities for them to settle out of court, and they keep blowing it because every time they see each other, they're just anger gets in the way, and it's just it was really well done. It was really well acted. It was actually, I think, one of the best films of the year that year. So I'm glad I got to see it, definitely. But like you were saying, Dane, it's always fun to see things that are sort of a window into other cultures and other parts of the world that you might not always get to see.
Oh yeah. Well, a good one, kind of like that, which won Best Foreign Language Feature back in the well, it was the 2011 film, but it was you may have seen it. It was Roger Ebert's pick for the best film of that year was Separation. It was the Iranian film.
I love that one, and I think Brandon loved it. We're big fans of that one.
That's a great film. It's always really nice to see films like that, and I mean, I'm making it sound like I'm thinking of like, oh, the ones that happen to win the Oscar that are these heart-wrenching dramas or whatever. Well, yes, but also something like Bon Cop, Bad Cop, which is like a kind of dark comedy / action film. Which also won, Best Picture at their Genie Awards, nowadays known as the Canadian Screen Awards. But so I mean it's always valuable to explore the culture of a different land through all kinds of films that they put out there. Like, I mean, a good entree for Japan is obviously anime as well as like Godzilla or samurai films. But I mean, they obviously have Japanese horror. They have films like In the Realm of the Senses, which I'm a big fan of. They got all kinds of stuff, and like I like I think French films can be good, Italian films. There's all kinds of great things to find when you go looking for them. I saw what's considered to be one of, if not the best, Canadian films ever, which is Adam Egoyan's The Sweet Hereafter.
Oh yes,
that's a
film.
really, really good film, and so there are all kinds of great films to find.
That was a Canadian production.
Yes, it was.
I'd forgotten.
Yeah, it was. He actually, Adam Egoyan got a Best Director nomination, but that was also the year of Titanic, so there was no way that anybody who wasn't Titanic was going to have a chance.
Yes, because it was Titanic was definitely the better film. No.
Well, I mean, it was it was the one to beat, that's for sure. But the it was a great film. It was I really loved the score of the film by Michael Dana. That was a very cool, different score, kind of creepy, kind of medieval, which I thought was cool.
Michael Dana does excellent music, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, he won the Oscar for his score for Life of Pi, if I recall.
For Life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah, Life of Pi. Yeah.
For some reason, I was thinking pie, and I was like, no.
No.
Oh, you like the number pi or the food?
The letter pi, the
Well, yeah. Well, what I've kind of been looking into are all of the films that you wouldn't necessarily see. Here's an interesting thing about the Canadian film industry as I've done my research into it. Something like it has a thriving film industry with different. It doesn't have like a singular city that it's best known for in its film world. Like, I mean, it's got the three major metropolitan. Well, but it's got the three major metropolitan areas like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal. But because they have to compete with American films, in the theaters because there unlike Canadian television, there are no rules that say that the majority of what they show has to be Canadian in origin. So therefore, the American films tend to dominate. But except for in Quebec, where the French language films that they produce tend to do better in their box offices because, well, it's their native language and they don't have to do like dubbing or subtitles for English language films, all that stuff. But in other words, the English language Canadian films that get made, there aren't that many that have a very distinct Canadian identity. The ones that do get made that are that way, they tend to not get outside of Canada very readily, and they have a hard time getting into theaters, which obviously, considering the state of the world these days, I don't think anything is in theaters anymore these days.
How much?
So yeah, the playing field has been leveled quite a lot, but the point is that you can have all these great films that don't get seen because the American films kind of crowd them, and specifically the huge budgeted American films that crowd out everything, even in America. But there's still plenty of good films that are made. But what I find interesting is when you do your research, there are a lot of films that you have heard of that are Canadian co-productions with America or with UK or France or any number of countries. But they don't necessarily advertise it too clearly. But they still count. Like I watched. This was a film I watched recently. Was The Lighthouse finally, which
Oh
I
yeah.
I want to see that.
absolutely loved it. I was a huge fan of. The director's previous film, The Witch, and this one was right up there. Both of them were United States and Canada co-productions. The Lighthouse, they actually make explicit mention of Robert Pattinson's character having done like lumber work in Canada, so there's a little bit more of a connection there. But it's such that apparently they don't necessarily make a lot of explicit mention of their Canadian identity, partially for international commerciality, but also some people have called it something called cultural cringe, meaning that there's this perception of Canadian films not being as good as American films, or like it's not really even based in any real fact. It's just more of a perception, I guess, perhaps because Hollywood's so much larger. But the film industry of Canada is heavily intertwined with that of the United States. And obviously we get a lot of Canadian actors and directors and talent, or we take our productions up there because it's cheaper to shoot there. So we're still intrinsically connected. It's just interesting that if you do your research, you're like, oh, I didn't know that counted as a Canadian film. And they have different rules as far as like, the talent in front of or behind the camera, a certain number of them, as far as whether that counts as a Canadian film, as well as, where it's shot and, that kind of thing.
I know the Clown at Midnight was the Canadian film.
Yeah, and there are certain ones that you don't even know, like even going way back, like Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS is a Canadian film.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, just certain ones that you don't necessarily expect. But it's pretty interesting. A lot of the Saw films were actually, they count as Canadian co-productions as well.
Well, and Brandon knows very well that I like to rail against how incredibly broken and out of date and stupid the Oscars rules are when it comes to foreign films.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that because they are submitted by the countries based on when they actually aired in that country, it's not really at all indicative of when Americans actually have an opportunity to ever see the film. And I believe The Insult was an example of that, because one reason I saw it so late was that its home release was extremely late. I don't even think it was in theaters before the Oscars, but sometimes they're not. sometimes there's no indication that they'll ever get a theatrical release in this country. But so that's what you're saying about marginalizing them. But the other weirdness of it is because uh, the country is the one that gets the nomination. You know what country they came from. And one interesting thing is that the majority of the films, I believe, but certainly the Oscar-nominated films by Deepa Mehta, the Earth and Fire and Water, are considered Canadian productions because they're an expatriate from their own home country, and they just set up shop in Canada. But they are, if I remember correctly, Hindi language or some similar language. There's so many Indian languages, I lose track. But they're definitely Indian set, Indian stories, not French or English, not much English language, but they're considered Canadian productions, or at least I remember Water was. I think the others were too.
Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre. I mean, look no further than which again the state of the Oscars is that's a topic for a whole other discussion. But just, the only thing I throw in there is that you had all these American films get nominated for Best Picture, and then what trounces them all is the South Korean film Parasite. So it was like, and which I still need to see. I'm waiting for the 4K to come out, but I've heard it's great. But like, my point is more so that you have all of this internal politics as far as like what films get chosen and why, as well as more external politics as far as like a lot of the people just kind of using the award ceremony as a way to showboat and to do a lot of preaching to the choir basically, and then amidst all of that they get trounced on their home turf by a South Korean film that doesn't have any recognizable American stars in it or anything like that. And I just thought, oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yes.
More of that, please. I would like to see the Hollywood suits get their asses handed to them on their home turf.
And I did want to mention as well, you were talking about earlier when you mentioned that the variety of films that you would see from, say, Japan or whatever. One Oscar-nominated film that was phenomenal that most people would never think of when they think Japanese cinema was Film Departures. That was an absolutely phenomenal film, and I need to watch my copy, but but that was one that is definitely not a kaiju film or an anime or a horror film, or it's about a guy who works with death and what have you, is like an undertaker, but still.
You're just not looking close enough, that's all.
Kaiju background?
Yeah, it was hiding under the cello.
Oh.
I mean, it's an interesting thing because I mean, it's not just foreign cinema, but it's generally speaking in the international marketplace, whether it's American films or whatever, the films that tend to translate the best, not necessarily literally, but I mean like culturally translate well. Those kinds of films tend to be action, sci-fi, horror, things like that. Anything that is intrinsically connected with knowing a country's culture, like a comedy or a drama, they tend not to translate all that well overseas. There are exceptions, but like a good exception was like some of Woody Allen's later period work, where he tended to set it in like Spain or any number of non-American countries, for international appeal, and also because a lot of his kind of later career fan base was based in like Spain or in other.
A lot of his financing was based in Europe too.
Yeah, that too. But I mean, so that's a notable exception. But generally speaking, those are the kinds of genres that will translate well culturally across, various cultures. Or like I'm looking right in front of me at one of my orders that still needs to come in. but it was Black Christmas, which is that's a Canadian horror film that you wouldn't necessarily know was Canadian, but it is still a landmark horror film, certainly in the slasher genre. And it just the original one from 1974.
Olivia Hussey.
Oh yeah, whew. But
Slightly from the production I just saw her in.
Well, that's my point, is that that's not necessarily like just a problem with other films coming into America. It can also be that way for American films going out to other countries. And so if you do your research, you'll see like Japanese comedies, or you'll see South Korean comedies, and you're like, I've never ever heard of this. And if you were to watch it, I'm sure that unless you were really entrenched in the culture, that you wouldn't necessarily get it. But again, such things can be good tools for learning about a culture, such as Bon Cop, Bad Cop, which did did big business in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of a international appeal it had, but it still had enough action and things happening to it or within it to make it appealing to people that are not in Canada. But it seemed like a lot of the humor and the cultural friction would have been more palpable if you were in either English speaking or French speaking Canada, either one. But
Right.
but still, it's a give and take kind of thing.
Well, and that's a big thing with anything Japanese. Like, they have a very different sense of humor than us.
Oh yeah. Well, especially if you look at like certain anime, like the kind that tended to, well, in the olden days when I was a kid, with the anime that would come over here on either Fox Kids or Toonami, either one of those, or the WB, those shows that would come over, they tended to be of a very specific type, which was,
Shonen action.
Yep, shonen action, and they tended to be obviously censored relative to what their original Japanese versions would have been, whether it was Dragon Ball Z or Yu Yu Hakusho, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I actually find it highly amusing. My library very recently acquired both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Super. And they put Dragon Ball Super in the kids section and Dragon Ball in the adult section.
How does that make sense?
Part of the reason why is Dragon Ball includes stuff that
that's fair.
But it's not really aimed at adults. It is a kids show. It's really good. It's really well done. But it's
still my favorite series of the series. Is
one of the most painful examples. And again, I know Brandon and I have harped on this one repeatedly, but a great example. One of the greatest Japanese comedy series ever made was Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, which they, not long after it came out, Media Blasters licensed it for American release. And then I think they put out a 4-episode volume and nothing.
They canceled it before it got to print.
They sat, well, some of them must have made it to the market because I've seen them listed. But so basically, they essentially pulled the plug on it without even giving it a fair shake. They sat on the license for like 3 years before they finally, I think it might have been longer than that, but before they finally threw up their hands and said, we can't localize this. And they finally put it back out into the wild. And now it's been picked up by, was it Discotech, I think?
It was Discotech. It was one of those.
That announcement came a few months ago, and we still don't have an announcement on the release. And it's like, but it is very, very much a show that is caught up in the minutiae of Japanese culture. It is very, very, very much caught up in that. And yes, it would be extremely hard to localize, but there are a lot of people, myself included, that absolutely loved it just as it is. I don't need the whole thing translated for me. It's like,
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I like the subtitles.
Well, yeah.
There's a market for it. I mean, and people can adapt to that humor. I used to not get any of the Japanese humor at all. And I mean, except for obviously like the blatant wacky shit that you'd see in anime, which I'm sure is probably partially what Dane was referring to.
Partially, yeah, but not all of it. Or or a good example is like even things that would make it over to America. Like I'm thinking of like Yu Yu Hakusho, which for the most part, was like it took itself seriously enough. It had plenty of humor in it, but like I'm thinking more so of like if that were an American show, it would not have things like the classic gag of like the whatever that is, like the pan or something that hits them on the head from nowhere, or like just scenes where people's mouths will get giant as they yell at somebody, or things like that. Those kinds of anime that they can that they do pretty regularly without breaking the overall serious tone. But it's that's even with stuff that came over here as opposed to stuff that didn't. And I can only imagine, like, if it was just a pure comedy series, how much of that would be lost on us. But
my point was, you eventually pick it up, you watch enough of it,
well,
like
and if you care enough as well.
Right. Like more and more Japanese shit I watch, I find I'm starting to develop a taste for, I guess it's like the dry dad joke type humor in Japan. I find myself laughing at the shit that, like the joke that the old guy tells in the fucking inn or something,
Yeah.
And it's neat to see it to where I can finally start like appreciating, like, oh, okay, that's, it might not seem funny, but it is,
Things that can also cause it can cause a bit of fatigue when you see enough shows, but it definitely can also help a little bit with the humor. Is that they have a lot, and like Americans do this too. I believe Canadians do this. Most Brits definitely do this too. There are stock archetypes. There are stock types of characters that once you've seen enough shows, what the humor. You get a lot more of where they were going with the humor, whether you necessarily feel the humor or not. You'll at least have a better idea of where it was coming from. So that helps too, like with repeated exposure to that or whatever. And there again, that's one reason why Zetsubo Sensei needs to come over and why it's such a good comedy is basically you have this teacher who is a grown-up Charlie Brown. That is who he is. He is a grown-up Charlie Brown.
I'm sold.
And he is surrounded by a class of characters who every one of them is an archetype to the nth degree. You have the psychotic optimist. You have the girl who is completely obsessed with order. You have the girl who's the stalker, the girl who's the shut-in. You've got all these. You've got the guy who's so invisible that he's literally invisible except when his bald patch is showing, and then suddenly people see him. They have all these stock characters ratcheted up to nth degree, and because it's an entire class, they get to play with a lot of different stock characters. But the two central ones are the ones who are the opposing forces of despair and hope. And so it's pretty cool. And the thing that sold me on it, this will sell you on the series, it's the same way in the anime and the manga. The opening scenes, you see the girl, the psychotic optimist, walking along, humming a song, having a good old time, loving the earth. It's cherry blossom season, and in the middle of a grove of cherry trees, she sees a man hanging from a tree. And she's like, oh my God, no, I got to rescue him. She runs up, grabs him, and yanks down.
Oh, boy.
And the branch breaks, and then he looks at her and says, what if I died?
That's good stuff.
Yes, it is.
There's also one thing I just wanted to play on this is one of the major things that was lost in translation, literally, is a lot of Japanese comedy is tied up in wordplay.
Yep.
And wordplay is tied up in the language.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is that, oh, you said this, I thought you meant that. Well, You know, in the in English, they could be saying, "Well, you said desk. I thought you said lamp," and you're like, "How did you even mistake those?"
Yeah.
But like in their language, one could sound like the other, and eventually you kind of can catch on to some of those, and they'll throw like translation notes. But that's the thing. All these countries, it's kind of cool because you can adapt, you can work forward. But speaking of moving forward, I wanted to give Dave a shot.
Lately I've been watching independent Japanese series of films called Shinobi, which evidently is directed by normally a stunt coordinator. And some of you might know him for being the stunt coordinator behind Tokyo Raiders, Silver Hawk, and he also did much of the stunt coordinations in Blade 2. This guy goes by the name of Kenji Tanigaki, and this is a series of 4 films. The first one I just watched the other day. It's called Shinobi: The Law of Shinobi. And it was filmed in 2004, and it basically kind of goes through a whole mythos of what the shinobi is. And the shinobi is like the lowest of the low of ninjas. And there are 2 classes that
that would be Shinobu.
There are 2 classes. One being the genin, and the higher classes being the jonin. And it kind of centralizes around two shinobis, one of which is like a master of his class, but he should be a jonin. But everybody's so jealous of his his talents and whatnot. He's kind of like a lone wolf in the whole thing. But he's sent for his first mission, and he succeeds, and all these different ranks of people end up trying to go after the person that he picks, which is his childhood friend Aoi, a young woman who is also shinobi, and they end up being in a sense runaways, because evidently one boss is trying to kill them, and it has some really cool gore moments, to be honest, for an independent film.
Ninja and gore sounds like it's I'm gonna need to look into these.
But I mean, there's this really cool setup in the end when there's this one guy who seems to like seriously like laugh at them and say you and they're basically lying about what has happened. There's actually a really nasty rape scene of one of Aoi's cousins that happens, and she gets killed. And so this one guy, he's kind of a coward, and he gets literally impaled with a log in the end. And I won't say what happens to the boss that is trying to take over their village wherever they are, but it is an intriguing series.
So it's like just like B grade ninja shit.
Yeah, it's like grade ninja shit, but
that sounds awesome. I'm always down for that.
Kept it up with like it feels like they really know their stuff. I mean, you can obviously see that the talent that is behind this man. I mean, he's normally a stunt work a man too. I mean, he was also the stunt double or the stunt work for Scorpion in Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Nice.
So
So there's a level of expertise brought to it that probably makes the action better than you'd expect from like maybe other movies at the same level.
I picked this collection up long ago, and since I've got all this all these Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman coming up, I figured it was a great series to get into, leading up to the rise of the Zatoichi reviews. So
oh yes, it's gonna be great. Every time ninjas get brought up, I remember Jake doesn't like Ninja Scroll, and my heart hurts a little bit. Didn't you just watch Lady Snowblood also?
me,
Yeah.
I watched about halfway through Lady Snowblood, but then Brandon Freeze came my early birthday present. I guess so. I started watching that, and that series is confusing. It like regurgitates the damn story all over the place, but it's entertaining. I mean, it's like it goes forward, and then it's like it like reuses the characters, and I'm not sure where it's going.
Season 2, he's talking about the series When They Cry, and season 2 ties that all together. It tells you why the story repeats and why everything happens the way it does. It's a very disturbing series.
You can look at it this way. The games were set up with question and answer arcs. So it's sort of the first season is the question and the second season is the answer.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't even hit the second season, and it's already regurgitated the characters are already, so it's confusing the storyline, because one moment you know that he's the killer, but then it suggests that he's the bystander, and now it's on a third story dealing with like one of the younger characters. It's like, what's going on?
Well, wait till you get to the story arc that does the same one you've already done, but from a different character's viewpoint.
Oh. So what is this? Is it like an anime?
Yeah, have you not seen When They Cry?
It sounds like it's like some Japanese Twin Peaks shit or something.
It's based off of a visual novel that's a dark horror visual novel. There's a whole bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, they're set up in question and answer arcs. And there's a spin-off called Umineko When They Cry, which that anime would have been awesome if it didn't stop in the middle of the damn story.
Oh, that was cool.
Phenomenal music. See, this is the kind of bloody horror I like. They don't go overboard with the gore, but there's still plenty of blood.
I don't know when they start pulling the fingernails out in that one
there
scene.
are moments. Especially in Umineko, there are moments. But I love the friggin' music. But yeah, the first part is sort of Groundhog Day horror, where it's like, but if you think about it, it's based on a video game, and it's sort of like you're kind of playing different potential playthroughs, if you will. Like each section is like a potential playthrough. What's that?
It is based on a video game?
Yeah, a visual novel, like I said, yeah.
That's a very Japanese thing, by the way, the visual novel. It's still interactive, but it doesn't necessarily get classed alongside your typical video game fare, even though to the common outsider, I would think it would be, I don't think they'd be able to tell the difference.
It is available on Steam, but it's like $80 or so for each part, so I haven't got it.
God damn.
I got it for $1 on one of the sales.
See, my kids have done a lot of the visual novel stuff. I've only ever done the one where it's like the birds that are dating, or it's like a Japanese high school full of birds.
Oh man!
But yeah, think of it like this for the time being, which would help you get through. Is think of it like they start over again at the story, but something changed slightly. And that changed how everybody interacted with each other. So whereas one person was the victim in this one, the other one turns out they're no longer the victim. Now they're the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. And everything is attached to this overflowing story that they kind of feed you bit by bit each time. So you kind of get a little bit more about the background, more about the curse, about what disease is going around, about why this person went off, and you get to see each one of them from that perspective.
Going into a crazy unraveling, and I'm hooked. It's just getting somewhat confusing. So
I'm looking to it
for a moment.
Yeah, season 2 is where they tie everything together. So when you get to that, you'll be able to say, "Oh, okay,
right
now I understand why they did all that." And
it sounds like it's kind of meant to be confusing at first, and then the pieces all fall into place, and stuff like that's usually fun to rewatch. So it should have some replay value for you there.
It certainly does. And in the United States, it was really sad. We talk about those release blockages, and that confusing nature turned a lot of people off. So the first season got released, and then they dropped it, and it didn't get released again until
So they just didn't even give it a chance to pay off.
Yeah, so it was just the first season, and it frustrated me to no end. I still have the first season box set that was the original release, which is worth a pretty penny now. And Sentai bought it up, thank goodness, and has released everything in it, and all of it. Then they compiled it all into one beautiful set, which I went ahead and sent to Dave for his birthday early on. So that was a. So I figured.
You finished it way after my birthday because I'm watching it bits and pieces of it here and there. So because that's the series that I'm going to work on, and then I'm going to go back to Nadia because I was working on that one.
Slightly different series.
Ever so slightly.
I am looking into possibly getting that French Count of Monte Cristo set of anime.
The Gankutsuo. That's a good show.
I've heard it's really good. I need to watch it.
It's a bit older,
I
but
haven't,
that you'd
I
like.
haven't finished it, but it's good.
I think you should check out Those Who Hunt Elves, Dave. If you don't have that, I think you'd laugh your ass off.
I do have it. In fact, I just set my 2 volumes that I had before of it aside in my 2 cell pile because now I have it the complete series on Blu-ray. That might be an after Nadia finishing thing.
That's probably what most people would consider B-grade anime, I guess. But I have a huge soft spot for it, and I just find the whole gimmick of the show hilarious.
Stripping elf or something like that.
Yeah, just stripping elves, finding pieces of that spell.
Well, I wanted to take one moment, at least as time is running. Well, it's not. It's actually we're making good time, oddly enough. But I wanted to mention this because this has come out fairly recently, and I wanted to give a shout out because Dane's involved in the project, and that would be Dark Web Mystery Box, which is actually available on YouTube. If I can get my addled brain to remember to do so, I'll try and put a link in the description below after all this. It is.
It's on YouTube, but only for 7 days after it. I forget which day it was that it debuted, but it's available for 7 days, and then it's not going to be on YouTube, but it will get a DVD release. And we'll provide the website information for that, but it's through Mort House Films, MORT House Films.
It's like their first film, isn't it?
I think so for Mort House. I mean, it was something that I was a part of as an actor. Really, it was something that I didn't direct it or produce or whatever. I wrote my piece of it and filmed it myself and acted in it, but I didn't have control over the final edit or anything. But I think that watching it all together, I think I did a good job of making sure that what I brought to it stood out. And that was what I had hoped for going in, was that I wouldn't just, be forgotten or whatever. I tried to, not to get too far afield with here, but with my bit, I tried to make sure that I did the opposite of what I thought a lot of people would do. and that seems to have worked. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from how a lot of people like my segment the best. And I know for myself that I was able to do things that I wouldn't normally do.
And just to give you all a basic idea, I'm not going to give away anything, but other than the basic plot, which is it's about these dark web mystery boxes. And you can see some of these on YouTube. A lot of them are fake, but there are the occasional supposed real ones. And you get these shady things that you order on the dark web in these boxes. And it goes through several groups. It's a bunch of different YouTubers who do collecting and unboxing. Cool Duder, which is a fairly big media collector YouTuber, is one of them on there. As a matter of fact, so I was like, "Well, that's two reasons for me to watch this," and they all get sent this particularly mysterious dark thing, and crazy stuff happens. But you're going to have to watch it to find out more, because I'm not going to ruin that for you.
Well, I mean, we can tell what exactly it is because it's on the poster. It's a VHS tape, and the note says "Play Me," and what is seen on that tape makes all kinds of insane things go on. And what makes it kind of special is that it was shot in quarantine, and so it's one of the few horror films that was made and in those conditions and put out despite those conditions.
Are they going to be submitting that to Roger Corman? I know that he was asking for people to send these things out.
Well, I brought it to Tony's attention. I know that we're trying to get it out there in a bunch of ways. It's already gotten quite a lot of buzz from a lot of indie horror journalists and things like that, which is cool. And I don't know what more will come of it, but I would just hope that people like what we did. I know for myself that the part that I had control over, I felt good about what all I did within my own little sphere of control, and it made me want to do more acting because I feel like I'm able to bring something that a lot of it's a little bit like I would put myself in the category of like a Jeff Goldblum or Christopher Walken, Nicolas Cage, someone that can do something that a lot of people couldn't necessarily do, and they have a type that you want for that particular role. And I think that's the ultimate compliment as an actor, that other people recognize your type, but no one else can really do it the way you can.
Well, I like Drug Bunny. He's one of my favorite characters.
Oh yeah, I mean he was quite the diva on set. He insisted that we do things his way, and I had to do a lot of talking him down from the cliff's edge, shall we say. But yeah, he did a good job, and I think what I mean is that it's in my segment. I have a stuffed animal that I interact with, who in the story I say that he had drugs inside of him from like an older unboxing, and that was actually based on real life, where a lot of deep web unboxings where the particular YouTuber will get sent stuffed animals that have drugs inside of them, but we don't know if they are actually illicit or if they're just aspirin, which for in the story that what I did was, for my character, I said that he had drugs inside of him, but what it actually was aspirin with the A and the S scraped off, which was my little homage to the birdcage. Which, if you've ever seen the birdcage, about those, about the Pirin tablets.
I forgot to.
So, what did you think? Have you seen it now all as a whole together? Do you feel like it came together well?
I think it's one of those things where, given the nature of how it was done, where everybody kind of had control over their little sections, I think that it everybody brought a unique voice to it. Everybody had different subjects for their particular YouTube channels. Everybody had different personalities and different ways in which the tape would affect them. So that was good. No two were like each other, and I think that was a good thing. And there was one scene that I would have liked to have been in the final cut of mine, but maybe it wasn't necessary. But yeah, I'm glad that out of all the responses that I have gotten so far, I'm pleased with how people have liked, what I did in it.
Has anybody else here seen it?
I have not, but I'm gonna watch it tonight for sure.
I've seen bits and pieces of it. I know that Jake's Chinese brother was in it. So
What?
I remember Jake's Chinese brother in it.
You got a long lost brother, Jake?
A blood drinker.
Oh. Okay, so with that being said, I just wanted to make sure I wanted to bring it up as a shout out because it's cool to see it, and if you guys, and it is on a timer, so if you guys can actually check it out, I would.
Yeah, I mean, definitely give it a shot while it's free and while it's up. And let me know how I did as an actor. I mean, I'm trying to do more acting. I think that it's such that, again, I don't anticipate myself being a chameleonic kind of Robert De Niro or Gary Oldman type actor, even though they're amazing at what they do, especially Gary Oldman, probably one of the all-time best. I kind of see myself as being more of a, I guess you'd say, kind of an experimental outsider actor, similar to the ones that I mentioned, just because nobody else can do those types of roles the way that they can. And I think that's a good way to make sure that you are remembered and that you stand out.
You and Cool Dude were polar opposites.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that was kind of funny. Again, like I hadn't seen anybody else's footage. I hadn't, all I did was my part, and it was funny because, well, so like he, which I didn't know what he was going to do, but like he kind of played it as if he was on cocaine. I thought, which, I mean, I know that his personality is more hyper. His personality is more hyper than mine, but like I deliberately because I knew that people that watched the tape in the story that they were going to be all horrified by it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to play the opposite. I'm going to be really nonchalant about it, and I'm going to pick it apart and say, oh, this is obviously fake. This is this and that. And, partially because, well, that's more than likely what I would do in real life, but also because everyone else would be horrified by it, I figured, if you play the opposite, then that kind of stands out in the audience's mind. Plus, there's something to be said for underplay, on film. If you underplay something that people would expect you to play up, then that can help take the audience by surprise. And
For
yeah, so I mean, I was just trying to defy audience expectations on a bunch of different levels, which I think that's what you got to do as an actor, but also as a filmmaker too. You got to tell the audience you think you know what's coming, but you don't.
It certainly made the both of you stand out. For him, for his kind of parody of himself, and
yeah.
And for you, for the like I say, I guess the opposite ends of the spectrum, energy-wise.
Oh yeah, which I wouldn't say I was dull. I mean, I would hope I wasn't dull, but like, just
in a good way. I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people, they kind of expect people on YouTube, especially on YouTube, to they expect them to be really animated and really overplaying things, which that's another thing is I saw on real, quote unquote, real dark web unboxing videos that people were to my mind, they were really overplaying it and overselling it, and that was a sign to me that it was pretty clearly fake. And especially because the people that were doing it, like, they tended to be people that they didn't really look like people that were really interested in the macabre or the supernatural or anything. They look like bros. And I'm like, you would so not be into this unless you were trying to get views and trying to be on a trend, trying to hitch your wagon to a trend here. So that, again, that was another red flag there. So I tried to make sure that I was the kind of person that would dispel a lot of the rumors and a lot of the urban legends surrounding such things, which I did my research, and everything that my character said as far as safe ways to travel the deep web and that kind of stuff, all of that's accurate, and it was all based on people that I researched who did do real dark web exploration videos on YouTube, and they did it safely. One guy in particular who is like an IT expert, he was able to do it safely. So I just took a lot of that stuff, plus just trying to impart upon the audience my own critical investigations, which I would hope they would, emulate.
Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of insight on the film.
Thank you for watching.
I wanted to bring it out there since we are live and it still had the opportunity.
Yeah.
So since we're close to the end, and I'm definitely wanting to go grab food tonight, we'll go ahead and we'll talk a little bit we'll do a little bit of an outro since we have some time for once to do it. Why don't I start with you, David? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel.
Sure. My name is David Craigie. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, but I somewhat run it with all of you who are on SeptumSin versus the World's Vlogcast. So thank you for coming along with me on the journey that I started out going on 3 years now almost. But I also moonlight at another channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about collection videos and video reviews from time to time. And I also interview directors here and there. So definitely check some of that out on either one of our channels. So I know I've been kind of obsolete in video reviews and collection reviews, but those are forthcoming as I'm trying to work with new programs here.
And of course, let's not forget that on the channel tomorrow on Inside Movies Galore, we are going to have 2 amazing films. The spectacular AAA title, Velocipastor, as the pre-show, and of course the main show, which is the animated film Ice Age. Matter of fact, those 2 in the voting, Ice Age won by, I think, just a single vote above it. So it's kind of fun to see them both together again.
That's quite the pedigree. I think Velocipastor was up for some Academy Awards, wasn't it?
At least 5 or 6 visual awards.
Right.
So, Mo, why don't you tell us about some of the stuff you've got coming up? I know you got some pickup stuff that was really cool looking.
Yeah, I've over on my channel, Drunken Master Studios, I've got some recent pickups from last month going up. A lot of good stuff. Also doing my Kaiju Quarantine. More episodes of that coming for sure. We're just reviewing old Rubber Lizard movies, man. And yeah, also going to be kicking back up the samurai stuff now that I've got more of it on hand and I'm not stuck just doing Lone Wolf and Cub. So I'm going to try to finish that out and, bang out some of that Kurosawa stuff as well. Nice. A lot of Yakuza papers on the way too. So look forward to just tons of Asian movies. I'm kind of taking a break. Typically I tend to lean more towards just straight horror, though I have had some reviews come out for that as well recently. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff over there. Lots more to come.
So Dane, anything you'd like to talk to us about some of your stuff?
Well, I mean, you did the work for me as far as Dark Web Mystery Box. Check that out on Mort House Films YouTube channel, as well as on the website where you can order the DVD and be able to see me in an acting role, and that way you can gather the family around and make fun of me. And so let's see, doing that. I'm involved with a new channel now called Indie Horror Film Creative, and I'm doing 2 segments for that. One of them is called Blu-ray Views, where I do a lot of unboxing, and I'm gonna do some actual formal reviews hopefully in the days to come. I did a massive extravaganza of unboxing. A lot of movies came today, so check that out on the channel. And then the second segment's going to be called No Money Film School, and that's where I'll be able to talk about some of the things I've learned as a filmmaker in at least in the indie scene. Obviously, as I rise up the ladder, I'll be able to share my insight with others, so that way they don't have to have a financial bar for entry to get into the world of filmmaking, because filmmaking should belong to everyone, and anybody has the technology now to be able to do it well. They just need the knowledge and the gumption. So hopefully I can help instill those in people.
Well, I mean, the thing was Lloyd Kaufman had also said anybody can make a film.
That's right. I mean, it's in that same spirit of make your own damn movie, which I would highly recommend those books that he wrote. But yeah, it's in that same spirit. And, I'm someone that it's like, I'm like Prometheus and bringing fire to the masses here. And, hopefully I don't suffer his fate. But, I'm trying to make sure that people know that they can do this thing that people in their immediate vicinity might not think that they could do. And just, everybody's got something unique to say. You just need to be aware of what everyone else has said, so that way whatever unique thing you have to say can be expressed in the way that is most optimal.
So, Jake, I know that you, of course, are my co-host for most of this channel, but you do have your own channel and plenty of nature to go out in. Matter of fact, nature seems to be more available than ever with all the humans gone.
Well, we haven't gotten that far yet, but I'm not as.
We're working on it.
If anything, there's probably as many or more people in the parks and such as. Because where else they going to be? But yeah, well, I'm Jake. I do have my own YouTube channel, Kotobuki Jake, that I have not been good at updating. I may have missed a phenomenal opportunity to get a good computer last night. I apparently found the right one, didn't act, and it's already more expensive than it was last night. It's very annoying. So I'm still debating.
George is going to start outclassing you with his computer.
No, but once I have a computer, dang it, I'm going to be doing editing on my own, and that will make the well, as Dane said, you get the right tools, you can make all kinds of stuff. So hopefully, I will get the right tools and get them up and running soon.
I was going to say, you got the software. All you got to do is get the hardware to run it on.
Yep. And that's the part of it also is time, because I believe it or not, I am in a profession that is working overtime right now. So, whew.
Well, that's count your blessings there, because I got the word back today that the most promising job prospect that I had lined up for me, that they decided not to go with me. But it's not horrific, just because unemployment has started to take effect now, finally, and the IRS's Get My Payment portal finally started to work for me. So hopefully the next unemployment will come in soon, and the stimulus will come in for me soon.
Good deal.
So best wishes to all of you out there who are listening. I hope you all are well, and hopefully you've enjoyed this little conversation. Some of us will be back next week. I actually have an interesting subject because I finished the new Woody Allen book, apropos of nothing. So I'm probably going to try and lead off with that. That'll be an interesting conversation starter, I am sure.
Oh yes. Which, I mean, I was not to give away too much, but yeah, in my formative film years, I was a huge fan of his. I think that, in the wake of Me Too and everything, and kind of reevaluating people's legacies, he's one of those ones that has now kind of been tainted in a way that he wasn't before, even though what he may or may not have done was in the public eye before that. It's one of those things where, it seems like the magic, the sparkle is kind of fading from my eyes as far as that is concerned.
Yeah.
Well, for that, I wish you all well, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.
Stay alive.
Yeah.
Mm.